You're listening to Aphrodite, My Love, a novel by Quint F. Campbell.
Letter 9. The Slow Descent into Purgatory. I wrote a little song for you, Aphrodite. I hope you like it. Well, just pretend it's coming from someone you really loved, or maybe it's the universe admiring you and singing your praises for what a wonderful and beautiful young woman you were. I'm sure mine wasn't the only heart you broke. But can I at least take the first prize for the heart that was shattered the most? I can't believe it, Aphrodite. We're so close to meeting now, and I'm so excited. Oh, Aphrodite. I loved you so much. I loved you like, darling, you won't believe how much. A tear runs down my cheek right now as I write these words. You were my world, my universe, my everything. You can actually listen to the song on YouTube. But here we go. Hope you like it.
Do you remember when we were young? We made each other promises. Oh, 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 we'd stay together no matter what. Oh, 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 bound by love to the end, bound by love so deep. Hey Aphrodite, I'll never find someone like you. They said that we were much too young to feel this way, to look death in the eye and say, thank you old friend, now we're even. You put my hand on your chest and said, feel my heartbeat, it's telling you how much I love you. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a taste so sweet. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never felt a touch so tender. With every sunrise that came and went by, my love for you grew until it filled the skies. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. My heart skipped a beat every time I thought of you. Do you remember the promises we made to each other? Hey Aphrodite, in the realm where love was laid, though time has woven stories and endless tears, our love's melody remains transcending all fears. Through the passing years and fleeting days, we walked hand in hand in love's embrace, but destiny's path led us astray. Yet your presence in my heart forever stays. Oh, 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 oh. Hey Aphrodite, I've never known a love so deep. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a taste so sweet. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never felt a touch so tender. With every sunrise that came and went by, my love for you grew until it filled the skies. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. In the tapestry of life we wove a tale of love that time couldn't erode. And as the years have painted our skies, our love a constellation that never dies. Oh Aphrodite, the seasons may have turned, but the love we shared forever it yearned. In the corners of my heart you'll always stay. The symphony of our love never fades away. Hey, hey Aphrodite, I've never known a love so deep. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a taste so sweet. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never felt a touch so tender. With every sunrise that came and went by, my love for you grew until it filled the skies. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. Do you remember the dreams we held so tight? Hey Aphrodite, in the softness of love's light, though years have passed and paths have strayed, our love's essence lingers never to fade away. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a taste so sweet. You kiss me on the mouth, I've never felt a touch so tender. With every sunrise that came and went by, my love for you grew until it filled the universe. Kiss me on the mouth, I've never known a love so deep. Goodbye Aphrodite.
My first day at Chaplin High School blew my mind away. I had never seen such opulence in my entire life before. The school looked like the grand royal palace of some European king with a grand entrance, big white central hall that looked like a Swiss castle. It had great long buildings that stretched out a mile in one direction and a mile in the other, and more buildings spread out every which way. I figured it must house at least a couple of thousand students. I never actually found out how many it housed. I'll have to check it one day. Some of the buildings were on 2 stories and even 3 if I remember correctly. It was the first time I had been in a 2-story building and climbed a set of stairs so high. I know, I was a right peasant Aphie. But wait till you hear the next bit. We had our first assembly where the headmaster, a white man called Mr. Ellison, who looked like he should be on a TV series, gave a resounding speech. I was really impressed with him. He talked about how even though we had our differences before, we were a new country now and we should now all get along whether we were black, white, blue, orange or green. It was the first time I'd heard of green and blue people, so I looked around to see if there were any just to be sure. But all I saw was a sea of tall white boys and blonde girls. Some of them with hair so long it reached the middle of their waists. I had never seen so many white people in one place before. And to be honest, I felt a little bit intimidated. Where had they all come from? Because in all my perambulations I had hardly ever seen a white kid of our age, so it was a mystery a whole school should be full of them. And another thing, how was I going to be able to tell them apart? I could never tell them apart on TV. You have to understand, Aphrodite, Africans and white Rhodesians lived in completely different worlds in the same country. So unless you were a maid or garden boy, you had no business with a white person. What was your world like back then? There probably was about 70 to 80% white students than Africans. So we were grossly outnumbered. Up on the stage of the assembly hall, I didn't see a single black teacher. I studied the faces of the white teachers and I realized I couldn't tell if any of them looked friendly or not, so I couldn't really decide which teacher I liked or not. At the end of the assembly, Mr. Ellison or his assistant explained the first years would have to write a test to stream us according to our abilities. This way those who needed the most help could get the extra help they needed. The first day of Chaplain High was an unmitigated disaster for me, Aphie. A tall, arrogant-looking boy with blonde hair stopped me and said to his friends, "Why is that boy dressed like my cook?" An older boy passing by, and overhearing the comment, said, "No, those are prison fatigues, Junior." They laughed and walked off, leaving me looking around totally humiliated. I think Mamamdala had already written me off by then, and had not helped me buy the correct uniform, so when it said khakis on the school form I had gone to the supermarket and bought the cheapest pair of khakis I could find, which were similar to the khakis I had worn to school at Rockford Primary. Those khakis were so thick you could beat someone to death with a pair and were probably ideal for prison inmates, being so hard-wearing. By the time I'd bought the correct uniform and a pair of socks, I had run out of all the money my dad had left me, and I didn't have half the uniforms and paraphernalia that was required by Chaplain High School. Why did we have to have so many different types of uniforms at that school? They had a different uniform for everything. It was a nightmare. They had a separate uniform for running, separate one for tennis, separate for cricket, separate one for prefects. Swimming trunks, who the hell needed those? In my world we always swam naked in the river. They even had a different uniform depending on whether it was winter or summer, as if there was such a big difference in the seasons other than dry or wet. Okay, it does get a bit cold in winter in Gweru, I'll give you that. It was a wonder I had survived the bush on one pair of khakis all year round for almost 4 years. The whole school was like a big fashion show. What did they think, we were all like really rich or something? Rule number 8 or whatever. Do not be a burden on your benefactors. Luckily my grandmother let me have some money for the immediate things I needed. Then I wrote to my dad in England and he dutifully packaged the winter uniform, a pair of shoes and a green blazer which was slightly too big. But I managed to swap it with another boy's. Of course, when the costs started mounting, I realized why Uncle Ben had been so against my going to Chaplain High School. The expenses of so many kids at the school would have been enough to break the bank. It all made sense then. Unfortunately, the seeds of discontent had been sown and I was gradually getting a bad reputation at home. If I remember correctly, for the streaming tests they made us write an English and a maths paper, and with the results from that, they placed students in respective sets. They got us back to the hall and one of the teachers called out the names of the pupils in the top stream. A1. I really liked the sound of that and my confidence was high. I would be called out second or third at the worst. By the time I had left Senga Primary I was back on top again, so I was feeling pretty good. The teacher started calling out the names, starting with the best marks. First, second and third came and went, but I didn't hear my name and my heart started beating as if it was going to explode in my chest. Fourth and fifth came and went and still I didn't hear my name. By the time she got to 20 my head was also ready to explode and my hearing and vision had become seriously impaired with fear. The teacher got to 30. But my name was not on the list. She announced that was the complete list of pupils in the top set. I was not in the top set. She then announced, and now for the second set, A2. And started calling the names for the second set. 1. Gibson Chuma. 2. Nkosayatun Gondoma. Ah! I sighed. I was in the second stream. I was disgusted, angry, mortified with myself. I literally would have preferred to die there and then. There were 31 kids smarter than me in my year. What was going to become of me? Was I going to end up as a bus driver or garden boy or worse? I tried to hide the tears, but they came like a flood, nose streaming. It was like somebody had died. Well, you could say someone had kind of died. My ego had been crushed, pulverized to ashes. Being a bit smart was the only thing I had going for me. Take that away and I was nothing. I didn't hear anything else then except my own thoughts until the good-looking suave Mr. Ellison, in a smart tailored dark suit, appeared on the stage and said he would like to explain a few things. He said that the allocations were temporary and if we worked hard and attained good grades, we could be promoted to a higher stream. But in the same vein, if we slackened and performed poorly, we could be dropped a set or even lower. Did he really utter those words about promotion through hard work and outstanding performance? I questioned myself in disbelief. I couldn't believe he had just thrown me a lifeline out of this predicament. Work hard. That I could do. I was going to work harder than a fervent titan. I was not going to sleep or eat until I had climbed that mountain and reached the summit. I was on a mission to attain the A1 promotion, even if it meant giving it my all or perishing in the process. And indeed that's what I embarked upon. We dispersed to our different streams to start our journey through Chaplin High School in earnest. I just wanted the day to end so that I could jump on my bike and get back home to the plot, be on my own with my own thoughts to plan my strategy to attain my promotion. But first, I had to get to the bike shed, where I found a bunch of white boys looking at my bike with total amazement. "What is that?" I heard one of them say to the others, face bright with glee. "It looks like something out of a waste bin." They laughed and poked it with a stick as if it was some sort of poisonous tree frog. The bike shed was full of shiny new racing bikes, choppers, pretty girl bikes with little baskets on them and fancy racing bikes with 24 gears and chains and gears that looked like they had been manufactured by an extraterrestrial civilization. The boys quickly lost interest and I jumped on my bike and cycled off as hard as I could to get away from there. My bike's noisy squeaks and squeals attracted unwanted attention. It was so embarrassing. Aphrodite. I wondered if people saw me and thought, what is that creature with that god-awful bike doing here? It was terrible. I wonder, Aphrodite, did you catch me at my worst? Was it my poverty that condemned me to a life without you, my true love? Damn you, fate. How could you deal me such a blow? But that wasn't my only problem. When I got back to the plot, I found a nice present waiting for me. A gift-wrapped present of epic proportion. In 1981, the universe had come back to collect with never-before-seen vengeance. What had I done wrong? Not prayed enough, not helped the sick and the poor? What? Waiting for me was the worst nightmare of my dreams. Something I thought I had left back at the old farm at Rockford and would never see in my life again. Waiting for me was a flock of sheep and a black and white dairy farm cow. Yup, sheep and a dairy cow, and guess who had to look after them? Yours truly. It's so embarrassing, Aphrodite. I don't even know if I should be telling you this. Lest the whole world should laugh at me. No, let them mock me. I don't care anymore. I promised you I would tell you everything and you can judge for yourself whether I can be forgiven or whether I should be condemned for my sins. Unbeknown to anyone, let alone me. After the war, Uncle Ben had sold the old farm in Rockford and brought the sheep to the plot. He had also bought a dairy cow with some of the proceeds, and I'm only surmising here. I was quite certain that he had done it on purpose to punish me for daring to choose to go to Chaplin High School instead of Fletcher High School. However, that theory did not stand up very well. There is no way he would have known my hatred for herding sheep and cattle, because I had never shared it with anyone. What was so bad about it? Everything. Rule number 9. When the chips are down and there's nothing you can do, do nothing. Letter 10. The day we met forever. My God, Aphrodite. The most important day in my life. A day I've lived and relived over 4 billion times for more than 40 years and now so close, and I choose to be lost for words. Let me take a moment to settle a heart that's pounding in my chest, and a mind that's about to explode in my head. I'm almost certain it had rained the night before. The air smelled fresh and sweet as it always did after the rains in Gweru. The sun was hazy as it trickled through the leaves of the jacaranda trees that stood tall, like sentinels all around the expansive schoolyard. Damn, I can't do this, Aphrodite. I need a strong drink to steady my nerves. Excuse me if I'm feeling a bit nervous. I'm about to meet the love of my life, for goodness sakes. I've waited over 40 years for this, so everybody can just please wait a sec. Ahem. I'm sure it was the first or second day of our lessons as the A2 stream of 1981 at Chaplin High School. I felt as if we were second-class citizens of the school, second to the geniuses in the A1 stream. I couldn't wait to get started because I wanted that A1 stream promotion more than I had ever wanted anything else in my whole life before. We were maybe in the second or third lesson of the day, and this one was a double period. It was a chemistry lesson, so the teacher had set up an experiment for us to find the melting point of a number of chemicals including phenylalanine, water, and mercury, I think. The chemistry teacher was a very tall white man who introduced himself as Mr. de Villiers. You remember him? He was as tall as a tree, looked about 25 or 26 years old max, but with really boyish looks. You know, if a seedling is devoid of light, it just shoots straight up trying to reach the light. That's what he looked like to me. His skin was as fair and smooth as a baby's skin. I was sizing him up, trying to figure out why he looked like a boar, but had a French name. I knew some little French already, because years back I had found a French novel on Uncle Ben's shelf and read it using a dictionary for translation. Simply because I had read everything else and had nothing else to read. Something about him reminded me of the boar that had threatened to set his dogs on a couple of friends and I a year earlier. He told us to get into pairs, showed us how to light the Bunsen burner and start the experiment. There must have been at least 20 Bunsen burners going, and I thought it was a terrible waste, all that gas burning to find out something that was already known. At the same time I thought, we must be such a rich country we could afford to waste all that gas. The experiment was underway, going quite well when there was a loud knock on the door. The door was flung open without giving Mr. de Villiers a chance to answer it. One of the teachers invited himself in. It was that blithering buffoon history teacher, Mr. Curtis. He was the guy that liked to scare the black kids by pulling live snakes out of his pocket and dangling them in front of our faces. You know, if there are 3 things African people were really afraid of back then, it was dogs, snakes, and boars. I hated him also, because from day one, he had started teasing me with the phrase, "Nkosi, you must have been a beautiful baby, but baby, look at your face now." And the thing is, I was really beautiful as a kid, so it kind of hurt, because I didn't feel handsome anymore. I was already starting to get a few spots of the dreaded acne scourge of teenagers, and my confidence was faltering because of it. Mr. Curtis said something to Mr. de Villiers, and Mr. de Villiers turned to the class and bellowed, his voice carrying quite easily to the back of the classroom. "Aphrodite Kasim. Is there an Aphrodite Kasim in here?" I don't know what made me turn around just in time to see the most wonderful sight I had ever seen in my whole life. You were the most beautiful girl I had ever seen in my entire life. Time came to a standstill, enveloping the room in a profound silence. The space was bathed in an ethereal light as you gracefully traversed the length of the classroom, drawing nearer and nearer to the front desk where I stood, utterly captivated by your presence. Entranced like a rabbit caught in the mesmerizing glare of oncoming traffic headlights. For a brief second as you passed my work table, our eyes locked together. It was like a shot straight to the heart with a white-hot golden arrow. My heart melted. The room filled with pure, dazzling light, like a shower of diamonds. The universe sung the most beautiful song ever sung since the first light in my ears. A song of eternal love. So pure, so deep, so beautiful. In that moment, I knew that you were the one for me, Aphrodite Kasim. Your name was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the most beautiful 2 words ever put together since the beginning of time. Aphrodite Kasim. I was in love, and it didn't matter that I was poor, it didn't matter that I had no mother or father or a nice sports bike. I was the richest, the luckiest boy in the world because I was in love with you, Aphrodite Kasim. From that moment on, Aphrodite, I was a different person. The old Nkosi was put in the shredder and tossed away, and new man was born. I was going to work hard, win your love, marry you and have babies with you. Our love was going to be the greatest story ever told since Romeo and Juliet. So Aphrodite, my love, tell me, was this not a match made in heaven? Why did you have to deny me? My only chance, my only path to true happiness, Aphrodite Kasim. From that moment, Aphrodite, you darling, was the only thing I thought about, every second of my waking moment, from the moment I opened my eyes and the last thing I thought about when I closed my eyes to sleep. I would run my fingers through your long black hair. I would put my arms around your waist. I would kiss your honey sweet lips, and I would look into your eyes and see the entire universe in all its glory, past, present, and future, all in your beautiful eyes, Aphrodite. And when you uttered my name, Nkosi, it felt as if the angels themselves were serenading me. All I had to do was master enough courage to tell you how much I was in love with you. You would respond, "I love you too, Nkosi," and we would be so happy together forever and ever and ever. When you walked past me, I noticed that you had long, rich, silky, wavy black hair that reached all the way below your waist and covered your entire back. I swear I had never seen anything so beautiful. I thought you were an angel, sent down to me, to take my hand and walk into the bright future with me, to be my soulmate and kindred spirit through the wonderful years that were sure to come. As you left the classroom, Mr. Curtis took a step forward and, addressing the whole class, he croaked raspily, in that smoking person-damaged old man's voice, "Do you know who Aphrodite was?" And looked around, waiting for a hand to go up. No doubt. Teachers are such junkies for hands up. I was just thinking, "Get out, you old fart, you're ruining my moment." But the next few words out of his mouth changed my life. I even got to like the man, and his teasing didn't seem so bad after that. He explained that, in Greek mythology, Aphrodite was the goddess of love, beauty, and procreation, and finished by saying, "Boy, wasn't that the most beautiful girl you've ever seen. I bet she's gonna break a few hearts," laughed to himself and left. So you see, my darling Aphrodite Kasim, I didn't have any choice after that, but to fall deeply, madly, and hopelessly in love with you. Please, love of my life, don't hate me. I'm but a moth to a flame, blinded by your beauty. My fate lies only in your hands. Forgive me, Aphrodite, because I could not have done anything than everything that I did to try to win your love. By not winning your love, I failed you, I failed us. I see now that no words can convey what can only be expressed with the whole body, the mind and soul, time and spirit, and everything that makes us human. So darling Aphrodite, I'm speaking to you from a place so distant, lost in the vastness of space and time, that it can never be recaptured. The time we could have spent together, the dreams we could have pursued, the smiles, the laughter, the joy, the love we could have shared is lost to time forever. My sense of loss and my sorrow for failing to win your affection remains inconsolable. I can't forget. I cannot forgive myself. But through it all, I've come to understand that love doesn't always follow the paths we plan. Perhaps our paths were meant to cross for another reason, even if the outcome wasn't what I hoped for. Your presence in my life has been a driving force of titanic proportions. I hope, my love, that wherever life has taken you, you have found happiness and fulfillment beyond your wildest dreams. And though I may carry the weight of what could have been, I also carry with me the joy of having basked in the sunshine of your beauty and the warmth and sustenance it gave to my yearning heart. Letter 11, Purgatory and the Monsters Within. Sometimes it amuses me when I think over my formative years and all the things that happened and all the crazy stuff I got up to. Since COVID-19, I've read a ton of self-help books. I had not read a novel in many, many years, and one day I just picked up a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey and was blown away. That started me on a path to reading just about every self-help book there's, including one very good one that I share with anyone willing to listen to me. It's a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That last one I would like for you to keep it a secret just between us, because it's like giving someone the key to the fountain of knowledge. And you know that knowledge is power, and some people can abuse power. Not me and you, of course, Aphrodite. We're good people. All these books share the same truth, and it's that we're all responsible for our actions. We alone and nobody else are responsible for all the outcomes in our lives, because of the choices we make at every juncture of our lives. Pretty powerful stuff. Hey Aphrodite, so yeah, I'm responsible for my misery. Fine, but if I could live my life all over again, I would make the same choices if it meant that I would meet you, Aphrodite. I would do it 1,000,000 times over, even if you rejected my advances each time. Hopeless. Case closed. On that fateful day we met, when school finished and I headed back to the plot, even my old bike looked nice. It had a lovely retro and original quality to it. Everything was joyful. The trees, the grass, the flowers. The noise of cars was music. The air smelled of fresh roses and the sunshine bathed me and caressed me tenderly. I was on cloud 9. The happiest boy in the world and the luckiest to boot. Even when I got home and was introduced to a new maid, who was already acting like she owned the place, I was too happy to care. I took the cow and sheep to pasture and spent the rest of the afternoon in blissful oblivion. Yeah, that was pretty much my life, in love with the most beautiful girl in the world. Get home, take the animals to pasture, my homework in the satchel, find a rock or tree stamp to sit on, and try to do my homework whilst watching that the animals didn't disappear. Do you know how hard it is to do homework, whilst outside in the bush, with the harsh African sun? All the dirt and bugs buzzing round you, creepy crawlies stinging you. I hated those days with every fiber of my body. The thing I feared the most was that one of my classmates would chance upon me in that despicable state, out in the bush herding a cow and sheep, and tell everyone at school. You'd get to find out that I was a poor country bumpkin, and that would be it. My chances of winning your love gone. I would hand in my exercise books filthy with mud and dirt. I don't know what the teachers made of that. I know once, Miss Bates, the French teacher, loaned me some new French books, and after a week reading them in the bush, the pages had black marks of mud and soot from forest fires all over them. I still remember the look of pure consternation on her face as she paged through one of the books. She looked at me and opened her mouth to say something, but she stopped and I could see a look of pity in her eyes. She looked away, trying to hide it. But I had seen enough. Although my memory was not as sharp as it had been when I was a kid, it still could record every moment like a video camera. Something about Miss Bates' kindness set my brain on fire. She was quite a short young lady. I wasn't tall by any stretch of the imagination, but I was taller than her. She was in her early to mid-20s. I would say, with the loveliest emerald green eyes you've ever seen. When I saw how conflicted and struggling to comprehend my situation, it made a deep impression on me. She was noticing me as a person. I existed, and I was not just a figment of my own imagination. I really liked her after that, and it spurred me to work really hard at the French subject. I nailed all the tests in French, and soon it became my favorite subject. The first sword of Damocles fell on my head not long after the new maid called Maposa started working at the plot. Maids did all the cooking, washing and ironing clothes, and cleaned the house. In return, they had free board in the boys' kaya and ate with us. She turned out to be a loud-mouthed and manipulative evil witch, who started poisoning Mamamdala's mind against me. Soon after Maposa joined, quite out of the blue, Mamamdala called me aside. Mamamdala had never done anything like that before. I loved Mamamdala and respected her more than any other aunt I'd ever had. But I was also terrified of her. I've no idea where that fear came from, because she had never said anything bad to me or about me. She had never beaten me for being naughty, in fact quite the opposite. She treated all the kids the same without exception. But even as I marched into the dining room, where she always sat at the table working at the sewing machine, I was literally trembling with fear. I got into the dining and stood by the table waiting for what was to come. I could sense someone listening behind, and I was sure it was the maid, eavesdropping. Mamamdala looked up from her sewing machine, plunked the large black scissors down on the table noisily, and eyed me through her thick glasses. I felt myself shrink to the size of a small tiny ant. She delivered the coup de grace without ceremony. Nkosi, you're a big boy now. From now on, I want you to wash and iron your own clothes. Maposa has quite enough work without having to wash your clothes as well. And why are you in the house? Where are the sheep and the milk cow? I was lost for words and staggered out of the house through the kitchen. As I walked past her, I could tell from the maid's demeanor that she was very pleased with herself. I carried on as usual, but what I didn't know was that was only the beginning of my troubles. Chaplin High School was about as refreshing as a school could get. It was like a small oasis tucked away close to Gweru town center, hidden and surrounded by tall old fir trees. You would never know it was there when you drove past it by car. This oasis was also a boarding school for boys and girls, day boarders who could lunch and dine at the school, as well as day scholars like myself. Its crowning glory was its sports fields, with green lawns that were as lush and soft as a green carpet. They must have used millions of gallons of water to keep the fields so green in a hot dry country like Zimbabwe. The fields were mainly rugby and cricket fields. But they also had a state-of-the-art racing track with a sports field in the middle. They had dozens of tennis courts, squash courts, and even a shooting range for crying out loud. Who has a shooting range in their school? It was insane. The school was beautiful. You could say Aphrodite, the boy from the bush, had been plucked out of the bush and then dropped into the land of plenty. Of course, this was all thanks to the boys who had fought the Liberation War and delivered us a bonanza like that with their own blood. So let's never forget them. The school had us try the different sports and select the one we liked. I tried out cricket, because I liked the smart white uniforms they wore. But when a blonde white boy missed my head with the ball that was as heavy and hard as steel, I threw the bat down and said that game wasn't for me. As it turned out, I found a new love right at the next trial. It was tennis. That turned out to be another match made in heaven. To think that Uncle Ben wanted me to miss this bounty was criminal. I gave tennis my whole attention and became really good at it too. But always, the feeling of being a second-class citizen gnawed at the back of my mind. I read books and practiced French and maths every minute I had free. At break time, I would sit by the tennis courts, because it was nice and quiet there and there were some benches outside the pavilion. Yeah, I must have looked like a real loner, but I had a mission, so I really didn't care what people thought. All I was thinking was I didn't want to grow up to become a bus driver or a garden boy and spend the rest of my life taking orders from other men. One break time I was sitting there, memorizing some French words, when I sensed the presence of someone. I looked up to find 4 or 5 white girls standing quite close, observing me like I was some kind of zoo animal. "What are you doing?" one of them asked with a tinge of disbelief, as if she had caught me stuffing sweets from a charity box into my pockets. Not wanting to sound rude, and rather pleasantly surprised the girls had chosen to come and talk to me and not laughed and just said to each other, "What a weirdo." "Studying," I replied proudly, bemused at being surrounded by 5 girls. "Why are you always studying? I've seen you here lots of times," the girl with really dark hair asked again. I cast my eye at all the girls. 2 on either side of her were all tall with brown or blonde hair. They were all white, but she looked different somehow. Her hair looked different and her whiteness was different. She didn't speak to me like African girls do, all shy and coy. She was different. She was forward and confident. I noticed something else. She was very pretty. They were all pretty. But she was off the scale pretty with perfect flawless skin. It wasn't the mottled, streaky, freckled skin that I found hard to look at, because back then I thought freckles looked like a horrible rash. Trust me, I had seen many horrible rashes in the bush Aphie, in my former years, and you kept well away from anyone with one, lest you caught the disease yourself. That girl's skin was perfect milk and honey type of skin, pink marble smooth, white as ivory. Not a scratch, not a mark, just softness and a shade of color that defied description. "I want to get the promotion to a 1, I replied earnestly, and the thought of the failure at the beginning of the term started making my eyes well up with tears. I desperately needed those girls to leave me before I embarrassed myself with tears streaming down my face. "Oh, we're in a 1. One of the tall blondes, who was as skinny as a twig with a razor-sharp nose, beautiful emerald green eyes and lovely pink lips, said with a beaming smile, "It's not that good. They give you tons of homework." Yummy, I thought to myself. That's exactly what I want. Is this girl stupid or something? No, she can't be. She already said she's in A1, I thought to myself. "What's your name?" the dark-haired girl asked, now smiling and looking quite amused by that whole affair. I told them my name was Nkosi. "Well, Nkosi, you know you can just go and sit in the library. It's pretty quiet there." "Library?" I asked. "There's a library here," I exclaimed in total disbelief. I'd read about libraries in big cities like London or Paris or the famous Library of Alexandria that had burned down thousands of years ago in Egypt. But I had never imagined that there would be one in a school. "Yeah, that building over there." They all chimed, turning to point at a building that looked like a large bungalow, about 200 yards north of the tennis pavilion. As the girls turned, their blonde hair flew behind them, catching the morning sun and glowing like fine strings of pure gold. There was a kind of mesmerizing beauty about it. "Well, goodbye Nkosi, and good luck with your promotion," the black-haired girl said, and they started to leave. She stopped and said, "My name is Athena, by the way." "And mine is Trudy," said the razor-sharp-nosed girl. Then they all turned about face and left. I was still waving at their backs as they were yards away, heading in the direction of the squash courts east. One of them had wavy golden hair flowing down to her waist, and it bounced along and moved with her every step. It was truly enchanting. It was the first time I had ever spoken to a white girl, and the first time I had noticed they even existed. I was surprised to see that they were just as pretty as the African girls, but so easy to talk to too. That chat with those girls really cheered me up and made me even more determined to get the promotion. So thank you 5 white girls of Class A1, 81 Chaplin High School. You can't imagine what a little bit of kindness did for a little lost boy. Apart from you, Aphrodite, I had not even looked at another girl with the slightest bit of interest. In fact, I was so out of it that I don't even remember any of the boys and girls in our class either. Terrible, really. The following day at break time, I decided to go to the library as the girls had suggested. I thought I was going to find a room with 1 bookshelf, a table, and a few chairs. Instead, as I stepped across the turnstile, it was like stepping over a threshold into another dimension altogether. It was an entire building with rows and rows of shelves as high as the ceiling and as long as the building. Each shelf filled with books upon books. My jaw dropped. I had no idea there were that many books in the world. I wanted to run up and down each row, touching each book as I ran. Instead, I walked down and round looking at the awe-inspiring sight before me. There were at least 10 rows like that with books on either side of the shelves in that section alone. But, even as ecstatic as I was, I felt a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. An image of an old man with gray hair and gray beard flushed in front of my eyes. He was sad and was trying to read every book in the library. Running out of time but only halfway through the library. I was overwhelmed. I realized that as much as I loved books, I was never going to be able to read all of them. Not even all the books on a single bookshelf in that library. There were so many books that one man could not read them all in a single lifetime or even in 2 lifetimes. I did, however, start sitting in the library and studying in there instead of the tennis pavilion. Occasionally, I borrowed random books that took my fancy and devoured them hungrily. Letter 12. Love's Labor Lost. My time at Chaplin High School was the most exhilarating period of my life bar none. Everything was new, exciting, and meaningful. In class, I tried to sit next to you as often as I could. I sought you like a bean sprout seeks light, like a moth flies to the flame. One time, in the French class, the class I felt at my best, I sat right next to you and said, "Hi, Aphrodite," smiling and with the finest voice I could master. You turned and looked at me briefly and looked away. I can never forget that first attempt to engage you in a conversation, my first attempt at winning your heart. You looked at me as one might look at a desk or chair or an empty space. Do you remember it, Aphrodite? At first I thought, oh, she's just playing hard to get, so I'll keep trying. But when it kept happening, I was like, okay, back off a little bit. What didn't you like about me so much, Aphy? I mean, I wasn't that ugly. I know as a young kid I had been really, really good looking. I mean, cute and drop-dead gorgeous type of kid. I couldn't have changed that much so quickly. And another thing, those white girls had spoken to me and didn't seem disgusted with the way I looked. Also another white girl, her name was Suzanne Foy, I think, had actually stopped me and asked to talk to me a couple of times. She was so nice to me, I could have sworn she liked me a little bit. So what was it you hated so much about me, that you couldn't even look at me? Jesus, Aphrodite, I'm sorry about that outburst. This is not a witch hunt. I'm writing to tell you our story so you can decide whether to forgive me or condemn me to eternal damnation. So please strike that last outburst out and let's get on with the rest of the confession. Chaplin High had a perfect balance of academic pursuit and sports. I liked both in equal measures, and the moment I started playing tennis I wanted to be a champion. It was during the heydays of John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg. I wanted to be John McEnroe. His temperament was fiery, unpredictable, and exciting. I dreamed of playing at Wimbledon one day. You would have to fall in love with me then. With the tennis club I had discovered an old school buddy from Senga Primary School. His name was Innocent and had been a hero of mine back then. He was skinny as a twig, but sharp as sword. He was so clever, and it was no surprise to me he had made it into a 1 outright. His English was impeccable and he knew so much about politics. I had actually asked him about communism and why we could not just take everything we liked from the Rhodesian whites after independence. He'd explained so eloquently that I was convinced one day he would become the president of Zimbabwe. He was a fervent tennis player as well. After class I could not wait to practice tennis. One afternoon we were happily enjoying a game on the nice shiny new, hard surface courts when out came Mr. de Villiers marching like a giant on stilts. His shiny black hair glistening in the sun like an oil slick. I could feel the hairs at the back of my neck stand. That bushman instinct I got whenever I sensed danger lurking in the shadows. He marched past us, his large feet kicking off dust on the path between the tennis court and Maitland House, the girls' boarding house. I was watching him the whole time while striking a ball back and forth over the net with Innocent. I could feel the temperature rise in my chest as I watched him go. I hated Boers with vengeful rigor. The war had only finished 8 months or so earlier and the Boers had killed thousands of our boys. I had seen the list of the dead heroes in the paper. It ran to thousands and thousands of combatants and innocent civilians, and this big bloated gorilla was aimlessly marching around the school, scot-free. I was thinking, hell, he shouldn't be allowed in a school full of kids. Why was he even allowed to be in a school? I was just thinking that when suddenly, Mr. de Villiers stopped, grinding to a halt, and a cloud of dust reflecting in the bright African sun kicked up and floated away. He came back towards us, barking, bellowing with a deep angry voice that came from a really massive chest. "What are you boys doing on the tennis court?" he barked. "Practicing tennis, sir," replied Innocent as sweetly as innocent child. I sniggered, anger rising inside my chest, marching towards him. I so wanted to confront a Boer, it was unbelievable. "Get off the court now, and wait for your coach outside," he bellowed, waving us with his big fat sausage-like finger and pointing to the exit. I looked around and could saw white kids on 4 other courts next to us, playing in wanton oblivion, and the irony of double standards was not lost to me. I wasn't stupid, I only pretended to be. But with him I had no reason to pretend. I shouted to my friend in Shona, making sure Mr. de Villiers could hear but not understand. The stupid white dogs had stolen our land and virtually enslaved us, but not bothered to learn our language. What is this Boer still doing in my country? He should leave and go back to South Africa, I shouted angrily in Shona. It had the desired effect. Mr. de Villiers had started marching away, but he spun round and almost running towards me shouted, What did you say? What did you say, you little ka? He wanted to say kafir. I smacked the fence with my tennis racket in anger. I smiled an ominous smile. There was a 10-foot fence between myself and him and at least 200 yards to the nearest court entrance. Even if he ran as fast as the wind, he would not be able to catch me. Besides, he looked like a big lumbering big tree. I was sure he couldn't run at all. The look on my face must have driven him insane. The man was 4 or 5 times bigger than I was, and there was nothing he could do to me from there. He composed himself. Right, you boys, go to Maitland House and wait for me there. I will deal with you later. Go now. I had to look to Innocent to translate to me what that big ape was trying to say. Innocent, who was a boarder at Duffy House at the school, was familiar with that type of language. Mr. de Villiers was some sort of housemaster at Maitland, so he was ordering us to go and wait for him there to receive our punishment. Innocent and I took a slow and circuitous route to Maitland House, discussing how he was going to punish us. He was going to cane us, of course. Innocent offered. I said I was going to tell that boar, if he even lays a finger on me, my older brother, who had been a guerrilla, was going to kill him. Of course, I had no brother, and all my cousins had been too young to go to war. I have a better idea, Innocent mused as we slowly walked, rackets in hand. He was kicking his racket with every right step, and it kept going boing, boing, boing. How about we tell him? We'll report him to the headmaster for calling us little kafirs. You heard him, right? That's what he was going to say. But checked himself last second. I regarded Innocent with deep admiration. Yeah, that ought to do it. Armed with our own foolproof response, we went through the gate into Maitland House grounds and waited outside his office. I knew Boers and English Rhodesians. Even though they were all white, were somewhat different. But that combination of Boers and white Rhodesians had created the most toxic race of people in sub-Saharan Africa. I thought the headmaster was a fair man after his speech on our first day, and this incident was going to prove it. Waiting outside Maitland House, we stood out like sore thumbs, because it was a girls' boarding house. Tall, skinny white girls in skimpy outfits kept popping in and out of the building. If I had liked white girls back then, it would have been quite a delightful experience. After a short while, which I found extremely irritating waste of my time, I heard the voice of a woman telling someone to find out what those little black boys were doing outside. A blonde head popped out of the door regarding us with a bemused-looking face, asked what we wanted. Innocent was replying when in marched Mr. de Villiers, without even looking at us. The man was huge. I don't think I had ever seen a human being that big, except maybe for the Incredible Hulk on TV. When he walked past, a gush of wind blew past us. He had his own weather system around him. I thought, if he was going to cane us, we were going to die in there for sure, so better say our last prayers. I was still defiant, not even afraid in the least bit, as we had at least 2 plausible weapons on our side. As soon as he disappeared behind the door, I heard the woman shout again. What are those boys doing outside, yarn? Came an angry voice of a white woman. She sounded really unhappy. There was short silence and then a loud no, blah blah blah. Get rid of them now, yarn, now. Sometimes the gods can just surprise you. Half your body can be inside the jaws of a lion, and then for no apparent reason, you taste funny or something, the lion spits you out and you're free to go on your merry way. We always used to say, if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. If it's not, then you live to tell the tale. I guess that's what happened, even if the tale is a little bit late. Even in the face of adversity, the steady march of time cannot be stopped, and with each new dawn, each new season comes a change, sometimes small, sometimes big, and yet other times monumental. I got my promotion in the second term of the first year and was able to take my foot off the study pedal a little bit. I like tennis, and that's what I put all my heart into for the next few years. I found a tennis coach who was so good and so kind, she eventually started coaching me for no fee. All I had to do was turn up. She even gave me a lift with her young daughter to some coaching sessions at Gweru Teachers College, past my old primary school. Her name was Mrs. Pringle. A number of times she even took me to her house and had private coaching sessions with a bunch of white kids. After a session, we'd sit on the veranda of her lovely house and down all kinds of squash. Remember Mazoware squash? Aphie? I actually didn't like Mazoware. I much preferred the red or green granadilla that came in a massive 5-liter bottle. Life was going like a dream, but it was a double life. A sweet life at school and a shit life at home. By my second year at Chaplain High, the sheep had gone, but the cow was still there, so I still had that duty. The cow was much less trouble, but still more trouble than I cared for. The humiliation was insufferable. I was mixing with all these rich kids, and if they ever found out who I really was, the shame of it would have killed me dead. By this time, Uncle Ben had purchased all the available land around us and was a proper property magnate by any standard measure. That only meant more back-breaking work for us. During the school holidays, we worked like donkeys. I miss seeing you so much, Aphrodite. Whenever I got a chance, particularly on Saturdays, I would jump on my old bike, cycle into Gweru Town Center, and ride around hoping for a chance glimpse of you. I needed to see you every day, Aphrodite. You were the magical fountain, the only cup of pure spring water that could quench my thirst. Just one glimpse of you would have been enough to free my soul. I had never known a love so pure, so innocent, so deep. I never felt so alive as when I thought about you, darling. Of course, I never chanced on you during those long school holidays. Where did you go, darling? Did you go on vacation away somewhere nice with your family? It was during one of those long summer holidays in my second year that something happened at home that was to change the course of my life and my brain chemistry forever. A tiny, insignificant event that would be like a puff of smoke to anyone else. Except me. For me, with a long history of my misery, the walls of purgatory caved in and came crashing down and buried me alive. A part of me died that day, Aphrodite Kasim. Oh my love. How it pains me to relive this day. I've locked it in a box and shut it away for decades. But now I must share it with you, Aphrodite. I promised to tell you everything. Right? It was after a grueling long week of working in the fields under the hot sun from dawn to dusk every day. That one afternoon, after lunch and a short rest, out of nowhere, some people in the family started complaining and protesting, saying that they would not got back to work that afternoon. They were exhausted and wanted a break from the hard labor. After a while, people started dispersing in all directions. I've no idea what had been decided, but Mamamdala, who was by then eating from the evil maid's hand, somehow singled me out and reproached me. She simply said to me, "Some of you need to know your place. You can't live here for free. Get back to work right now." That was it. 2 sentences. 2 sentences that sliced and diced me into tiny little pieces and flushed me down the toilet. 2 sentences that crushed and mangled my body beyond repair. I wasn't angry with her. No, on the contrary, the shame and ugliness that I had felt all my life came flooding back from the depths where I had buried it. She was not wrong. I was a charlatan, a fraud, a vermin, a parasite living off other people's hard work. My sister and I had brought such misery to that happy family for years, being somewhere where we were not welcome. I was overwhelmed with such shame and guilt. I immediately knew what to do. My eyes streaming with tears, I dropped everything I was doing and walked back to the main house. I knew what I had to do. I loved, feared and respected Mamamdala so much I couldn't believe she could say something so horrible to me. All those years, she had never loved us. All I was to her was a servant that was eating her food, wasting her electricity, taking up space in her home. We were a terrible inconvenience to her, and I was disgusted with myself and saw no reason to be alive anymore. I would leave this world and give her a break. I locked myself in the bathroom. I knew there was a bottle in the bathroom marked poison that had been kicking around in there for years. I picked it up and opened it and brought it to my lips. I was about to drain the contents into my stomach when from the corner of my eye, reflected in the mirror, I saw you standing behind me holding the bathroom door open and looking straight into my eyes in the reflection, with those lovely brown eyes of yours. You were smiling so beautifully. You were wearing a green dress with green ties tied in a bow around your neck. The ties hung down the front of your neck onto a smooth light brown bare chest. I could just make the small rise of your boobs covered by the dress gathered up in a nice curve by the elastic in the dress. You had one leg in front and your dress rode a couple of inches above your knees, so I caught a glimpse of your delightful light brown skin. You were much older, 24, 25 maybe. You looked stunning. I think you were my wife in that vision. In the softest voice, that sounded like music to my ears. You said, "Nkosi, what are you doing?" My heart exploded in my chest because I had never had a voice so beautiful before. As I turned around to look at you, I was mouthing, "Aphrodite, what are you doing here?" I looked at the door. It was firmly shut. There was no one there. I turned back round to find you in the mirror where I had just seen your reflection. But I only found my own reflection still holding the bottle of muddy up to my lips. I looked at the boy staring back at me. He was only 14 or 15, gaunt and sad. "I will marry you one day, Aphrodite, and I promise I will take very good care of you and our children. I will never leave you and I will never abandon them," the boy in the reflection said. "I'm not lying to you, Aphrodite. I'm telling you exactly what happened." I placed the bottle of muddy back on the shelf and closed the bathroom cabinet. I wiped the last of the tears from my face. I didn't want you to see me cry, in case you decided to return. How could I protect you if I cried every time something bad happened? I thought to myself. I was so happy that you turned up when you did, Aphrodite. I was even happier and excited about seeing your beautiful face after such a long time. I knew then that we were going to be married one day and spend the rest of our lives together. We were going to be together for eternity. All I needed to do was stay alive, win your heart, pass my O-levels and leave the plot. Start a new life of my own with you somewhere. Far, far away. There were just a couple of years more to go through, till freedom. Rule number 9 or 10, I don't know, I've lost count. It is not over until the fat lady sings. Bide you time and wait some more. The path will reveal itself to you. I unlocked the bathroom and got out. On the way out, I heard Mamamdala ask Maposa, the house girl, what I had been doing in the bathroom for so long. Maposa brushed past me on her way to the bathroom. The witch looked disappointed at seeing me alive. I guess she figured out what I had been up to in the bathroom, because I never saw that bottle of poison again.